so much, and thank you, everyone. So I've been here since morning, been listening to some of the conversations, and we'll try throughout our panel to also take on some of the themes that we've been listening to and some of the key questions that have come up. But before all of that, I'll probably go around the entire panel and request everyone to please introduce yourselves, give a bit more flavor to what does a typical day in your life look like? So maybe about a couple of minutes to say, here's who I am. And I know the titles are out there, but as we all know, the titles don't always paint a picture. So shall we start from that end? Dietmar.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, sure. What does my day-to-day look like? So I work for a digital banking group, as you guys have heard, Tyme, and we've got banking operations in 2 countries, South Africa as well as the Philippines. South Africa, we've got about 6.5 million transactional banking customers, and the Philippines we launched in October last year, and we've got about 300,000 transactional banking customers there. So it being a startup, my day-to-day involves absolutely something of everything, from worrying about why some data feed isn't working today and why a report's not going out and jumping in and getting hands dirty, to strategic decisions about how do we use data in whatever decision needs to be made within the business. So very, very broad range from right, in the detail, getting your hands dirty to the strategic discussions, using data as a backbone.
Thanks, Dietmar. Hi, everyone. I'm Sean from SingHealth. I think those who are from Singapore knows that we have 3 clusters. So I'm from one of the cluster. The other 2 are National University Health System as well as the National Healthcare Group. Typical day in my life. So basically, I'm actually from the more research and development side of the house, and we view data science from the more scientific angle in the application of the new technology that has been evolving very rapidly over the past few years in the aim of essentially improving health services, improving patient outcomes, and so forth. So the rigor from the health perspective, I guess, would certainly have to be there because we're taking care of the population of Singapore. And the system that is being set up, there are a few pillars. The infrastructure side, so the R&D side, the operationalization side, as well as the clinical domain as well. So all the domains will be impacted by the technologies that we hope to bring to bear, and that we can essentially maintain a sustainable healthcare system forward.
Good. First of all, wish you all a very happy Women's Day. I think it's good. Nice to be here. This is the last session, so I hope you folks are not exhausted, and I think this is perfect timing to talk about data and women. Myself, my name is Raj. I'm head of technology for Westpac. It's an Australian bank. I head the technology for the Asia business. We largely run institutional banking in this part of the world, financial market, institutional banking, and corporate investment. My day in the life looks very colorful, given the way how it runs. Largely, we look at how do we use technology, and there is a lot of data when it comes to banking. We capture data in different forms, and we want to see how do we use that more effectively to service our customers. Largely, we service the Australian and New Zealand market, but then we also service the colleagues outside of that market from an international perspective. So we keep data at the core, but the value is still people-driven, right? So it's more about human touch. How do you make it more safe and sustainable banking? And tech plays a very crucial role in today's world of banking. And it's always a conversation, whether it's with the risk, compliance, FinCon, or with my bankers, saying, how do we use tech more effectively, right? How do we get rid of papers, and how do we make it more closer, more personalized banking when it comes to our customers? So good. Nice joining this panelist. Thank you.
Cool. My name is David. So I'm the head of data for GTF in GoTo Group. So GoTo Group is an Indonesian company. It's a 30 billion Indonesian company. It's got 3 parts. So Gojek, GTF. GTF stands for GoTo Financial, and also Tokopedia. So my day from data point of view is very interesting on a daily basis. Goes all the way from technical discussions building models, discussing with the team about the solutions, to strategy discussions, interaction with business, interaction with product managers from the future development point of view. So across actually a big range. My background is a little bit, I guess, very different from the fintech and also from app space. So before here, I was working in Visa. So I've been working with Visa for 5 years, mostly in the banking space. So similar to Raj, and also talking about fintech or financial partners about financial solutions, using data and data science for building financial solutions. So yeah.
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Rajat Kumar. I work as a principal data scientist for ST Engineering. So at ST Engineering, I'm one of the hands-on guys, as well as I'm one person who's driving the technology itself, like what tools, what softwares do we need, and what sort of talent do we need in the upcoming years? What is the plan? What are the challenges we are trying to solve? And what are the customers, as in we provide solutions and services to other companies. So what services and what customers can we have next, and what sort of solutions should we build so that we can serve them better? So we are trying to make some robust data analytics and science solutions. So I'm leading this effort for the ST Engineering side.
Thank you so much. And I hope you found that as interesting as I did, because often when you just see, here is a person does data science, but as you've probably seen, everyone's lives can be a little different. Some will spend more time with colleagues in the data space, some more with business, some with risk and compliance. So it all kind of varies depending on where you are. As for myself, I look after a consulting firm in Singapore and look after the APAC region. So I've got a team in Singapore and Bangalore and Hong Kong. So I'll quickly move on to the panel, and I have probably the first question based on the conversations that we were having through the morning. A lot of you have been asking, where do we start with the data strategy? Like, are we starting with the outcomes, or are we starting with saying, what's the data we've got? So the first question over to you, Dietmar, because I've seen on your company's website to say you've actually improved 70% customers' quality of life. So, I mean, what better outcome to say we've actually managed to, we can stake that claim. So I'm just curious, you want to shed some light on that? Like, how did you measure this, and what's the story?
Thank you. So it's not a piece of research that we did ourselves, some marking and homework. It was actually done by the research arm of the World Bank that did a case study on us and actually directly engaged with our customers. But it's actually very topical for this discussion, because data and ML is very much at the heart of how we've been able to achieve this. And there's really 4 pillars on which we've managed to do this. The first one, and that was really the ethos and why the company was founded. So the original founders wanted to democratize banking. In South Africa and lots of other countries in the world, you've got a handful of dominant banks that are dominating the market. And they are quite exclusionary in nature. Either the products are very complex and they're intimidating for customers, or they're expensive. So there's many reasons why people find it intimidating to engage with banking products. So we try to design and set the bank up from day one to address these challenges and almost fears that customers have engaging with the bank. So the first point that we did is actually giving people access to banking, which might sound really simple if you live in Singapore. Everybody's got SingPass, all your information is on there, people can link it, they can KYC, they can get your address. In emerging markets, these types of infrastructures don't exist. So firstly, being able to verify a customer, obviously using tech, which is not, earth-shattering what we're doing, but it's using biometrics, fingerprints, and picture verification. That's sort of the easy part. But what's really stopping people in a lot of these emerging markets from actually getting a bank account is the proof of address. A lot of people don't live in formal housing. In South Africa, people live, and a big portion of the population lives in informal housing, what they call a township. which is similar to a slum that you would get in India. So people don't have an official address. So yes, there's streets and there's a house, but they don't physically own a property. They don't have official rights and taxes. So they can't produce a piece of paper that states their address. And without that, you can't get KYC, you can't get a bank account. So we digitize that process. We don't require paperwork. So we have lots of data vendors that we use because people leave digital footprints. And how can we source data and how can we predict what your address is and verify it? And in the worst case scenario, we can enable location tracking on your phone within the banking app and then triangulate and verify that at least your location is very close to what you've stated. So that's been a big part, is that we've actually been able to give people access to a bank account. And then the second part is on the cost. Being a digital bank that we could build up from day one into the cloud, we could build it in a way that was very, very scalable and very cheap. We literally have 250 people working for the bank in South Africa, and we've got another 250 people in our tech hub in Vietnam. And we're competing head-on with the big 5 banks in South Africa, with the smallest one having 30,000 employees. So we can offer banking at a much, much reduced cost compared to our competitors. And then the third one is on service. So given that we were able to build the bank from scratch, we don't have legacy, we can build it with a data-driven view in mind. So finances and making payments, having access to your money is a very emotional and very personal thing. So if people make a payment, they want to know that the payment arrived on the other side. Or if they want to access their funds or see the balance, they want to be able to log into the app. So making sure that you are proactive on service and you're constantly monitoring what customers are doing and understanding what pain points are there, and seeing, that they lock themselves out of the internet banking profile, or that they lock their card, or based on some ML models, can you predict that you think they've lost their card? How can you proactively communicate with them on how to reset their PIN, get a new card, that they don't go through sort of this emotional panic of, I've lost my PIN or lost my password or locked myself out. How am I going to access my money? So that's the one, is on service, to really be proactive and not wait for the customer to phone or try and get hold of you, because we're a digital bank, we don't have branches. And so enabling that trust is obviously important for us, and that's how we do that. And then the last one is on lending. So if customers need access to funds, we need to be able to provide that. So using alternative data is a big part of our strategy. So we've got lots of partnerships in country, whether or not it's with retailers, that we share reward schemes, that we can see shopping behavior, shopping data, device scraping, whatever it is, to actually find a data or digital footprint on a customer. So South Africa is a very mature bureau market and very mature credit market, but the only way you can get access to credit in South Africa is if you already have credit. So if you don't have a footprint on the bureau, very, very difficult to get access to credit. So once again, one of our foundations is to have a lot of access and a lot of R&D going into alternative data sources for lending. So yeah, enabling credit to people that previously didn't have access to it is probably the fourth point that contributed to that statistic.
That's really something, and I hope that addresses some of the discussions we were having earlier as to whether you start from the framework or you start from the problem statement, and where do you actually get to. Just curious, would any of the other panelists want to address that, to say where have you really started this entire journey? Because when we're talking about, okay, we know there are emerging technologies, we want to use machine learning, we want to use AI. Does it start from, hey, hang on a minute, there's this new cool technology, let's start to use it because we want to be seen as innovative firms and we want to be seen as that? Or here's a problem I want to solve, go find me the right technology. Like, where have you really started from? Anyone?
I'll take it. So I think every of this scenario, the thing should start with the business challenge or a pain point. Without a business problem or without a business pain point, there's nothing about the technology you can use to make something fancy, but it's not going to return anything. So it's like the tech is always there to support a business and not the other way around. The business should not keep paying tech so that it becomes more fancy and fancy. Instead, the tech should support business that it's better and it creates more value and it's going to generate some revenue or it's going to do some cost saving. I think my take is that, yeah.
I think as a head of tech, I come across many startup companies. For tech guys, all these tools are like the toys for the kids. We're super excited when ChatGPT is now everywhere. Everybody wants to talk about ChatGPT. I had my head off ask the same question, but when you're working in a bank, you have a responsibility to keep your customer data safe, right? The banking is done based on trust, saying that, you know what, you're going to keep me safe from fraud detection. With all the scams going around, how do you keep me safe? AML, KYC check. How do you know me, right? Like we were talking about, you're being tracked around using Google coordinates, it kind of concerns you. So the tool, it's obviously, I think it's a two-way side of the coin. The old world is I wait for my business to say, hey, I have a problem, Raj, can you help me fix it? The new world is, I turn up to the business saying, there is a better way of doing this work, right? If my ops team is working through doing an KYC check, I say, how long does it take for you to kind of come out with a solution? They say, I think we spend about 5 days. Let's say, my corporate or institutional, relationship manager or traders, they're putting up a proposal for one of the large customer here in Singapore. We say, hey, how long does it take for you to come out with the pricing? He says, oh, it takes me about 30 days, as an example. Then can I make it into 5 days? Like, wow, that sounds interesting. Can I build some dynamic pricing to this one, right? So looking the same current workflow, like as you said, it's very important that you need to know your business and you look from a different angle using the technology, because not everything you built in-house, you need to work with, there's amazing talents out there, and people sometimes don't believe when I say there's 499 well-funded startups in Singapore alone, right? If I combine ASEAN, it's way more bigger. And you need to be open to hear to the new ideas, new ways of doing it, and that's how you accelerate your business growth. That's the kind of change, right?
Brilliant, thank you. Just curious for David. I mean, how do you see that within your group? Do you see the problem starting more from business, asking for a technology and a solution, saying, can you help streamline this? Or the firm going, oh, by the way, we're going big on AI, machine learning. I'll probably add an example that, let's say, I've seen myself, which I didn't add in my introduction, but I worked with banks at the other side of the table. So while everyone here is from data, I'm more from past business experience, where we'd start with saying, okay, we've got a fraud scenario. We want to apply machine learning to put predictive analytics to reduce fraud. So do you start with something like that, saying, here's a problem, help me solve the problem, as opposed to then saying, we just want to be looking innovative?
Sure. The fact is, if you want to start purely from data point of view, I think you're going to face the situation that you're going to out of job pretty quickly. Right, so for the doing data stuff for the sake of doing data stuff, I don't think it makes sense. So the business products is always number one priority for any companies. This is the reality and this is the situation. I mean, if you think about a data flow, how the data is generated or created in the first place, it actually starts from a business problem anyway, right? So the data is there to be created initially as a byproduct, and then later on, you want to use that byproduct to feed back to the business loop or to feed back to the product loop to enhance the products or enhance the features or enhance the customer experience. This is the right flow. If you start from the middle of the whole loop, if you start from data and then try to find a problem to use your data to solve, I don't think it defeats. I don't think it's fully rational. It defeats the purpose of having data in the first place anyway.
That's great, thank you. Just keen to hear your views. So Sean, I mean, you're not from the financial firms or the engineering firms, but you're more into the health sector and more from an R&D space. So very keen to hear your views of, what do you think and what are the big problems that have been solved or approached in SingHealth or otherwise?
Well, I just want to follow up on the comments, and I completely agree with the panelists that it always have to start from the problem, the business case we are trying to solve. But I guess in all the other industries as well, healthcare has got a very complex considerations, and in particular, public healthcare is not for profit. It's really to take care of the population. So from that angle, what exactly is meant by a business case is really multi-dimensional. It's not about just having cost-effective care. It's not just about cost. There are other considerations that we have to put into the equations. We need to also, certainly patient outcomes is certainly something very important, and by itself, it itself is not a trivial matter to consider what you mean by patient outcomes. Patient satisfactions, quality of life, quality adjusted life years, mortality, all kinds of consideration will come in when we just talk about one particular aim of improving patient outcomes. And beyond that, what about in a broader setting when we talk about COVID, pandemic, the chronic disease plague that is coming up, the surge of chronic diseases, diabetes, and so forth. At a population angle, public healthcare has to deal with them. So public population health is a very key concern in the equation that we are trying to grapple with. What is our business problem? What is that exact business problem? And beyond that, because healthcare, like all service industries, are very human-oriented. That means there's a direct connections with the people that we are caring for. And that also means the service providers' welfare has to be taken care of. Whatever technology that you are considering, it really doesn't just stems from, hey, it's getting more cost-effective, it deals with bed congestion, it deals with patient outcome, but your service provider, they are negatively impacted, you will not be able to provide good care because the human element can never be taken out of the equation, regardless of you talk about robots, and I don't believe robots. Okay, so but that is actually somewhat interesting because recently I had a conversation with someone that is at my age, and the interesting proposal was that perhaps it's just our age group that has this aversion that healthcare can and always need human touch and human involvement. What if our kids that is like 10 years old, 9 years old, if they grow up with all this chat GPT robotics around us, right? Would they be very acceptable to being pushed into a surgical theater, taking the anesthetist out of the equation? You have a robot, you have sensors, you have imaging, everything, and even insertion of catheter is done by robots. Will they be acceptable? I do not know, but certainly not for me, because all these equipments, they are bound, they have problems with maintainability and reliability and so forth as of now. Because I came from an engineering background, I know there's an opportunity for mechanical failure, but there is also an opportunity for human failure. It may take away human failure. So then, it's really a multi-dimensional consideration when we talk about outcomes. And very interestingly, when we solve problems in healthcare, right, like we deal with bed congestion and things like that, we look at systems perspective. We look at the systems must function well, be capable of dealing with the wait time, the congestion, and very fortunately during COVID-19, Singapore health system, the public health system has performed, I think performed well, be able to sustain that. We don't see trolleys of patients outside that doesn't have a bed. We have sufficient capacity. And we were able to ride that wave off in a pretty good way. But apart from there, right, there are other considerations like, hey, I need to provide better care for patients. And that's the reason why perhaps there's a need to bring certain patients or certain institutions to give better care. And that will impact the patient outcomes because of the specialties that the institution have, the equipment, as well as the organization. And there are multiple reasons for the patient's perspective, but it impacts, in general, the system's perspective of the equation. And all this makes the whole calculus extremely complex. And that's the reason why when we deal with problem, we always have to keep an open mind. And when we deal with implementation per se, it has to be viewed from a variety of angles. And just a very simple case of using SingPass, I think one of the panel Dietmar mentioned, right, SingPass. right? So my own experience is definitely very good to have a single point of contact and you have an application, you have an electronic applications. But I also do know in the community there are elderly, there are old people who have a difficulty getting on this application. So how do we get adoption? How do we get implementation? So that whole process, right, has to take individuals into considerations as well as the resources that we have available. So it's from, I mean, there are tons of problems if you ask me. How do we deal with that and how do we resolve that? And certainly we take we need the whole of population kind of approach because our calculus is not really just about revenue, certainly not about profit. It's really about the population health, the healthcare of every individuals, and to that extent, even if we roll out any applications or whatever, the individual's role is extremely important. I mean, if you just imagine there's an AI that mentions that, hey, maybe I'm obese, better do some exercise, but I don't do exercise, I'll still be right. Yeah, so I mean, it's a whole of population approach to digitalizing or to bring in technologies to improve health of everyone. I don't know. It's a very long answer to that question, which I don't have the answer.
I think that's
Summary,
great.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the idea is not to have the answers, but keep asking also the right questions, right? So I totally agree. Would anyone want to add anything over that?
Yeah, just for the human element, right? So every day morning when I walk into office, I go to the coffee uncle, I say, "Kopi si sutai kau." He makes my coffee, tapao, I take the coffee, I go. I'm sure there could be another robotic AI can make exactly the same coffee, but that experience that I get in the morning, my brain knows that I connect with him. He's seen me every day. You know, that's the human element, right? So you can't actually, they say just because you can automate something, just don't do it for the sake of doing it. It applies even in any business, right? Whether it is healthcare, banking. For us, it's like keep the banking simple, banking for everybody. You just don't need to have a bot there just because you know you can afford to have a bot.
Just one thing to add, right? So from the business environment point of view, there's always a return of investment, right? So ROI is a metrics. It might be a few metrics to record or help you measure the success of the product or success of the service. Do those. Yeah, do those kind of things before you start working on any data problems or data science solutions, machine learning models whatsoever. It's important. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think just adding on to what you were saying, keeping alive that human element is so important. And I couldn't agree more because so many times, you hear of firms, shutting down their branches and whatever else and trying to push people more into digital channels. And that's where sometimes you've got a chatbot, but it actually kills the experience more than anything else. So it might be really cool to look at, but for many individuals, it actually can drive people towards financial exclusion or not being able to express vulnerability. So those are like really critical themes as well. Going on then probably to a lot of the conversation through the mornings also been this connect, as I was saying, between technology or data and business. So when we're operationalizing or scaling a lot of the things we're talking about, saying, hey, here's a problem, how can you solve it? What's the right tech over here? What is the single greatest challenge? And the question's to everyone. What's the single biggest challenge when working with business in trying to then connect the dots? Is it education, culture? I don't know, over to you. Anyone? Dietmar, do you want to start from that end?
I can. I'll answer it from a bit of a different angle, which at least from my experience has been the biggest challenge. And it's not necessarily selling the idea into business, but it's getting them to buy into what are the foundational pieces that are needed to actually make this happen. A lot of things sound really simple and easy, but if you don't have the right data pipeline, so you don't have a scalable feature store that's being driven off your raw data, that you've got these predictors that you can train your models on, or you've got an ML pipeline to get these models into production. So a lot of the time, for us, the challenge is more on getting the business buy-in and support and funding to build some of these foundational pillars that are then applicable and benefit all the areas for the various use cases that you might have. So it's not necessarily selling an individual idea that you want to service an area. It's more getting, how do we get this foundation right that actually everybody needs, but nobody wants to pay for. They don't want to be the first one or the first one that gets the benefit. Now, he doesn't want to pay everything and others have to pay portions. So how do you get that balance right between getting the overarching capability in place versus actually enabling? So selling that and getting that buy-in and almost doing ratios across the various areas is probably the ones we have found the most challenges. And once again, it's all about selling the outcomes, but don't selling the outcomes without positioning what is actually needed in order to make this happen from the start. I've seen a lot of people sort of selling the dream, and they make it sound too simple, but just to get people on board. And then when they need to start actually get into doing it and delivering, it takes much longer, it costs a lot more, because that foundation layer wasn't there, and that wasn't part of the discussion initially when we went to business to sell the idea.
Anyone else? Your view on the greatest challenges in operationalizing?
I think more than challenges, the old school used to be multi-year projects, right? The head of tech, will come out with a 5 years roadmap, 5 years plan. Those worlds have gone, because even our customers, the millennials, expect micro experiences, right? You lose their attention in less than about 0.8 seconds because they have something else coming up in TikTok, something up in LinkedIn. So you need to come out a similar way in parallel in business side. It should be micro plans, right? It should be stepping stones. You build something that the business can see visible outcome, and they know it's a progressive step towards it, right? And then removing, largely from a data perspective, and I see, is how do you remove the data silos, right? How do I make the data accessible for my business to provide service to my end customer without any friction, right? So he doesn't need a data scientist to be able to answer to a customer saying, what is my loan balance? Can I make something better with my mortgage plan? I want to do some investment. How do I make better investment? Can I make the data accessible to my end customer without any friction? It should be very transparent. And to your point, I think we're talking about, is somebody spoofing me making it more transparent to you, saying that it's a very fair data, ethically accessible, we are not compromising any of the information, I keep it more secure, right? Because the business folks don't understand multiple technology components goes behind. And you don't need to be using those jargon, right? I don't need to talk to them about AI. I don't need to talk about ML models, right? All they need to know is saying, Raj, how do I solve this customer problem? Or how do I make this process simpler? So I think keeping it simple, start with foundational blocks. That way it is never a challenge working with business. And you speak only business language. Most of the time, tech, it again used to be the old school thing. The tech guys are happy with their boxes. You get them out of the shell, get them to talk to the real people and say, what, this is what they want. They don't need to go to Mars, right? They want to be on Earth, something like that.
I would say, practically is the understanding of data and understanding of the data value. So the possibilities of, data is unlimited, right? Different departments and different people, different teams have different understandings of data and what you can do with data, right? So we talk about, do you start from technology or do you start from the business problems? Yeah, of course, the answer is you start from the business problems. But how does the business team know, we have a data team, we have data points to support the business problems, to support business initiatives. I think this is the key, right? So if you have the people understanding data, understanding the value of data, understanding the possibilities of data, that leads to the following question is, let's find a data team and then try to address the issue altogether, right? So that's the loop. So this is one issue, one key challenge. Another key challenge is you have, from data point of view, like what I said, unlimited potential. Which one do you focus on? What problem do you try to solve? What is the distraction you should remove from the team? This is very, very important. Like it goes back to my point before, ROI, success metrics for products, models, new service, that's the importance. That's the important part.
I think that's great. Do you want to add anything to that, or do you think they've covered it?
I've pretty covered it, but I'll say communication is the most. Communication between the business and the data team, always the key problem.
I think absolutely spot on, and probably what I could probably add to what you just said, it is the prioritization and the education. So a lot of times the C-suite probably is not always well versed with the art of the possible from the data. Also, then they've probably got to also understand other requirements such as risk or privacy requirements. So just to bring it all together, there's a lot for various people to start to understand, so that there's at least that lowest common denominator in terms of the language that's being used. So a lot of it is just getting the entire culture along. And to what you just said, it's the ROI. But along with that, whatever I've seen, and I'm keen to hear your views on that, but often because new regulations come in, there's usually a budgetary constraint, and there's often a fight between, well, I've got to meet the reg requirements, I've just got to tick the box, versus I've got the time and the money to innovate. Do you find that constant shuffling between business requirements, saying, hey, I need that out the door first, and I need that out the door first, and can you stop this one and pick up this one? Do you feel that when you're servicing multiple businesses?
I think there should not be any debate in terms of priority, because meeting reg requirement is having the right to do banking. That gives you the right to do banking. That's how you have the license. Because you're not going to say, actually, what? Let's go launch a new feature, okay, which is a very cool stuff, and we'll look at the regulation later. It doesn't work like that. So, that's the foundational blocks, madam, we spoke about, right? How do you keep, the investment on security aspects of building my security guardrail? There's no compromise. You're not going to be debating about that. In terms of putting reg changes, that's required for, and MAS is obviously forward-thinking compared to, across the market. I've worked in my previous bank with about 17 different regulators. Anybody will go back and look at the papers that MAS has written, whether it's about using Web 3.0, which I think we spoke about doing SFF. There's quite a lot of white papers that's written on that, right? So it's very important that you look at the reg changes. But at the same time, that's why the CI/CD pipeline, or you talk about MLOps or AIOps, comes into picture, because the time to market is very important. The old school of deployment, everybody would have seen, I do a release of new feature once every 3 months. That's gone, right? I looked at one of the company a few years back, Pingan. In one of the conversations, we could see during the busy, day, their team was able to go launch a new feature, do an A/B testing when we are having a board meeting, right? So it's like that. So as long as you can launch new feature, you break it into small modular changes. That's why all the concept around agile, trying to build into the CI/CD pipeline, automated deployment, these all come into play, right? And you need to provide, and that's why using hybrid cloud gets you better control, because that I don't need to worry about the underlying bare metals. I just need to worry about what's my strength and focus on making it better.
Yeah, so if you talk about, coming back to the questions on in dealing with business problems, and how do you actually get acceptance and being able to roll out certain technology and projects, right? From the angle of a problem that is identified by the domain, as well as the people who understands what the system is functioning around, and to have that correct intent of providing health. I think Raj talked about right to banking, right? We are talking about right to have a good health, right to even live, right to even survive. It's all of our own goals. So if it's all of our goals, essentially. And to that extent, if the intent and the direction and the objective of doing or working on certain technology makes sense, we don't see any problem, right? So, for example, one of the well-known thing that most of us know of is this. I think it was recently also in the news, My Responder app, which essentially is rallying the community around any out-of-hospital cardiac arrest patients. So we see tremendous acceptance of this simple technology, and it is just a web application. There's no AI rallying community around. And that's not just acceptance. We see the rates of bystander CPR significantly increase over the past 3 to 4 years. And it dealt with a very significant problem, because even though not all bystander CPR, if it's applied, the person will be safe, but the chances of the person being safe is much higher. And it also shows in the outcome that we have higher survival rates for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest patients. And there's a significant aspect of electronic defibrillation, which is something we have to apply to the cardiac arrest patients within 4 minutes. Otherwise, neurological deterioration will set in. All of us know in the domain, the cardiologists know, the emergency physician know, the pre-hospital emergency care, everybody knows within 4 minutes. But how do we get this to the patients? And that's the reason you see all around us, there's a lot of AED. The problem is, do you know where the AED is then? Right? So it gives rise to other problems that technologies will have a high potential to resolve, and to resolve a significant health problem, even to resolve a significant mortality problem. So given all those, right, and we are very fortunate in Singapore that most 90% of people I see in the health system, they are driven by the right perspective towards healthcare, public healthcare. I can't say for all, certainly not all, but majority. So we all know this is the reason for us to work so hard for, I guess, and the reason for us to have our families in Singapore. So actually, I don't see that much friction if the direction is correct. But the friction I see, right, is when we push from the technology angle without knowledge of what are the problems. Again, it's a business case problem, right? So without knowledge of what, right, then you see friction. And then people raise, is it friction because you are reluctant to change? My answer is no. Have you identified the right problem? If you identify the right problem, you will get the solution in to deal with that problem. Anyway, that's my...
I think that's brilliant. And absolutely, I mean, there is friction. And there's a quote I heard somewhere, right, saying when there's a problem, we just want the best solution. It doesn't matter who or which technology, but the idea is to solve the problem. It doesn't have to have come from me or from you, but we just need to solve the problem. On that note, I'm just conscious of time as well. Shall I just open up to questions on, any questions from the audience? Does anyone have any questions? Great, I think that's brilliant. Oh, there you go. We've got one question, Ria, here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been fascinating, this session, even though it's the last session of the day, to hear 3 different perspectives from the startup, the incumbents, and government on how you use data. So my question to all the panelists is this. I mean, well, even though there are different perspectives, right? I was going to add, I see a common thread in all the 3 different perspectives. And the common thread is that you are trying to solve problem with big data, but obviously from a different perspective. So I'm just wondering whether you can get out of your perspective and try to address this question I have for you, all of you, that what do you think is the most important human problem that big data can solve? That would provide the answer for the greatest good, for the greatest number of people. So maybe you just want to step out of your current role and try to offer an answer on that one. Thank you.
I can start. Personally, I'm interested in fintech, right? So that's where I am. So GDF is a fintech company. So combining data and financial problem. So that's my personal interest. But if you ask me the question like, stepping outside box and then try to think about, data, on the human being level, what is that biggest benefits? I would say health, medication. I would say that's the biggest benefits that data can provide. If you think about, I don't know how much audience knows, to actually create a new medicine, that takes years. It takes years to kill a particular to get some medicine out and then to cure some diseases, right? So research and the years of productionizing some medicine, it takes years. I believe data can play a role in there, which is already happening. I do believe health is definitely the biggest sector that can benefit from data, big data. Human being data points, disease data points, DNA data points, gene data points. That's my personal thinking.
For me, I think probably I'll look at three aspects of it. One, in the digital world, fraud prevention. I think data gives better access to have insights on how do you prevent even before the incident could occur, because you have so many security attacks that's happening even at this point in time when we're talking. But the technology advancement of the data has given you a better access to kind of prevent it. Number two, my personal interest, sustainable investment. How do you ensure that it's not greenwashing, but you're actually really doing a sustainable investment? And you look at the data from the source till the end point, and you know that it's actually a real green investment that's going in. And I think the third thing, given that I'm from the financial or banking sector, how do you make data gives you, if you're a startup, as I said, even I have quite a lot of interest on the fintech firms, a lot of the young kids come up with new ideas. You have access to the financial sector from across the globe, right? So data makes it easier to say you can tap in from an investor sitting somewhere in LA, or doesn't matter, he's sitting in Sydney. Now that's the kind of power of data, right? So you're able to connect and still able to leverage on the larger ecosystem, not just on the local banking system.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I completely agree, and completely agree with David as well, because there's a reason why I've been in health for so long. But it's a very loaded question. So data is there, I must say, and the evidence-based kind of medicine and healthcare is always there. I mean, for hundreds of years, since 300 years ago, what is the definition of epidemiology, right? What is happening to my people, and I want to deal with that. It really stems from evidence-based data, and they start collecting data at that point in time. And that gives rise to modern medicine. But still yet, modern medicine can't deal with a lot of problems like the most recent COVID-19, right? Everyone sees that the deluge of data actually resulted in some negative consequences. Whether you take vaccinations or not is a big question, right? Is the right thing to do or not, right? So then is this the problem with massive data is there. I think all of us acknowledge. Social media and all those, everybody have access to data, and that lets us question, and questioning is good. We don't yet have an answer how to deal with COVID-19, otherwise we would have said the pandemic has ended. The pandemic is unfortunately still there. We are still living within the pandemic. The other point I want to point about data, right, is that the real value of data in health or in population health doesn't exist within an institution, within a cluster, even not within a country. So if the data that is, the real value of data is data that can be linked across, especially health data, across the entire population, then we know what is happening to our population. But beyond that, across different populations, across different countries, then we can deal with global health problems. And we see there are challenges even in doing that because of what you mentioned, security, data governance, everyone has the right to their own privacy. And we have to deal with that. Because the real value of data is when we really have big data. And I cannot claim that Singapore, even one cluster has big data. It is so minuscule compared to China data. Your big data is the China's billions of population. You have that kind of data, you probably will have a lot more insights into the whole of the Chinese race, right? So, but then we have a very unique advantage. We have very deep data. We have very accurate, very precise data because we make effort to collect good data. But yet, if that good data is not linked across multiple populations, we cannot resolve that grand questions. And it's not just population health. We talk about global health. We talk about, I mean, most recently I learned about One Health, which talks about the environmental impact on health. So if not just health data as well, then you talk about your activity data that links across different governments and all those, we have to make sure that it happens. And that's what we are trying to do. The value is there.
Great. I'm just conscious of time. We're out of time, but maybe just the final thoughts from both of you, right? Is there anything you want to add? Very quick ones. Thank you.
So just to give a perspective, aeroplanes were never made perfect. Over the years, over the decades, now we have aeroplanes. We are flying commercially, and we are not so afraid to fly in it anymore. Because over the years and over these decades, it has become almost perfect. And so is the fact with any technology, including data. Now it may not be perfect, but every day it is touching our life, including your banking transactions being more secured, your MRTs breaking down less. Everything we see or we see through has some data solutions in it, and it's just getting more and more matured. So it is impacting, and yes, of course, healthcare being the most significant place where it can impact a human being's life, it can be life-saving. I would say it would be one of the most, let's say, most effective or efficient way of using data in the world. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Final thoughts. Over to you.
Maybe just a last thought of where I see really big opportunities. So I'm on the retail banking side, so it's not something that I specialize in. But if you think, what is the lifeblood of the economy? It's small businesses. It's guys starting a 1 or a 2-man business that eventually grows into a 20-man business, or they employ 100 people. But those businesses that start out have virtually no ability to access funding currently in the financial system. So it's very mature once you're a big company and you've got security and you've got financial statements, or you're an individual and you've got a bureau profile. But these small companies also have a footprint. They've got customers, they've got an order book, they've got consumers on the other end that leave a footprint, they leave ratings, etc. And I've not seen anybody actually use all these various footprints, bring it together, and actually provide a solution for these smaller companies and actually enable them to become not massive conglomerates, but just become from a 1 or 2-man operation to be a 20-man operation. And that's, especially in the emerging markets, that's the lifeblood of the economy.
Great. So thank you so much. I think we've had a wonderful discussion. I've certainly enjoyed it. I hope you have too. And on that note, I just want to say a huge thank you to you all. We started with the point that the outcomes are most important, and we've ended on the same point that it's all about how we add value to people's lives. So have a beautiful evening, and thank you for staying. Bye.